My name is Otis, and I never thought I'd find myself in this position. Marriage, in my mind, was built on trust, on love, on an unspoken promise that no matter how hard things got, we would face them together. For 9 years, I believe my wife, Marjorie, felt the same way. But then, one evening, she shattered that belief with 5 words. Closeness doesn't matter in marriage. I don't know what hit me harder, the casual way she said it or the fact that she truly believed it. We had been sitting in our living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting shadows on the walls. The conversation had started as something simple, a discussion about how disconnected I'd been feeling, about how I wanted more time with her. I wasn't accusing, wasn't even upset, just yearning. She smiled. Not in a cruel way, not even dismissively, just as if she were explaining something obvious to a child. Otis, not everything has to be about deep emotional connection. Marriage is more than just feelings. People change. Love changes. I stared at her, my stomach tightening. So what are you saying? That it's fine if we just become roommates? She shrugged, sipping her tea. I just think you're focusing too much on closeness. It's not always the most important thing. I wanted to believe she was just going through something. Maybe stress from work, maybe something personal. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't new. It had been happening for months. The subtle ways she pulled away. The long hours at work that never seemed to add up. The constant, almost robotic reassurances when I told her I missed her. You're overthinking. Everything's fine. But things weren't fine. And that night, lying in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, I felt something I never had before. Loneliness. The kind that creeps under your skin, that sits in your chest like a weight you can't shake. The kind that makes you feel invisible, even when the person you love most is lying just inches away. I knew, then and there, that something was wrong. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel safe asking her what it was. Because deep down, I was afraid of the answer. The days that followed that conversation felt different. Not because Marjorie acted any differently. If anything, she seemed lighter, almost relieved, as if she had unburdened herself of something she'd been holding in for a long time. But for me, something had shifted. I found myself replaying our conversation over and over in my mind, analyzing every detail. Closeness doesn't matter. People change. Love changes. It was as if she had quietly redefined what marriage meant without telling me. And now, I was stuck trying to figure out where I fit into this new definition, if I even fit at all. I tried to brush it off at first. Maybe I really was overthinking. Maybe she was just stressed. But then, the small signs started adding up. She was always on her phone, more than usual. Not in an obvious way, not in a way that screamed guilt, but enough for me to notice. She would turn the screen slightly when I walked into the room, her thumb tapping quickly before locking it. She had never been the type to care about privacy between us before, so why now? Her work schedule had also become unpredictable. She'd always worked late sometimes, but now it was every other night. Business dinners, last-minute meetings, corporate outings. Reasons that seemed plausible until I started noticing a pattern. Every excuse felt rehearsed. Every explanation just a little too smooth. One evening, I decided to test something. She had told me she had a late dinner with clients, so I casually asked, "Where are you guys meeting?" Marjorie hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before answering. "That Italian place downtown, the one with the wine bar. You wouldn't like it. It's overpriced." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But the moment she left, I grabbed my phone and did a quick search. That restaurant had closed down 6 months ago. I stared at my screen, feeling my pulse quicken. Could she have just made a mistake? Maybe she meant another restaurant. Maybe she wasn't lying. Maybe... No. My gut knew the truth before my mind would accept it. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. If she was hiding something, I needed to be sure before I confronted her. So I did something I never thought I'd do in my marriage. I started paying attention, really paying attention. And what I found, it crushed me. The other life she was living. I started with small things. Checking her phone when she was in the shower. Not snooping, just glancing. She had no new texts, no calls, no recent apps open. It was too clean, too perfect. almost as if she was covering her tracks. Then I checked our bank statements. I wasn't expecting much, but my hands started shaking when I saw the charges. A hotel downtown, twice in the last month. A high-end lounge I'd never been to. Expensive dinners, but always for one. I felt sick. And then came the moment that broke me. One night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering. It was barely audible, but I caught enough. "I'll see you soon." No, he doesn't suspect anything. "I know, I miss you too." I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the sheets so hard my knuckles ached. I had my answer. But the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Choosing my next move. For the first time in my marriage, I didn't feel like a husband. I felt like an afterthought. A placeholder. I could have confronted her right then, could have screamed, demanded answers, let out the rage that was boiling inside me. But I didn't, because I wanted to know exactly who I was dealing with. So instead, I stayed silent. I played the role of the oblivious husband, watching, waiting. And as I did, I realized something even worse than the betrayal itself. She wasn't just cheating. She was ready to leave me. And she thought I had no idea. I don't know what's worse, the betrayal itself, or the fact that she was so comfortable living this double life right under my nose. For days, I carried the weight of my discovery in silence. Every time she walked past me, every time she kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, every time she laughed at one of my jokes like nothing was wrong, I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand to know how she could look me in the eye and still pretend. But I didn't. Instead, I did what she had been doing to me all along. I pretended. I smiled when she smiled. I nodded when she talked about her day. I even played along when she told me she had to work late again, watching as she checked her reflection in the mirror before heading out the door. And with every passing day, I learned more about the woman I thought I knew. Her patterns, her secrets. She had a system. Every business dinner happened on the same 2 days of the week, Wednesdays and Fridays. Her phone was always face down, and she took it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She had a sudden interest in working out, buying new gym clothes, but never actually going to the gym. And the most painful realization? She was happy. Happier than she had been in years. I wasn't sure what hurt more, knowing she was with someone else or realizing that being with me had made her miserable for so long. But I kept my emotions in check. I needed more. More proof. More certainty. Because if I confronted her too soon, she'd just twist the truth. I had to let her think she was winning. The night I saw the truth, I needed undeniable proof. Something I couldn't explain away. Something that would strip away all the excuses. So I did what I never thought I'd do. That Friday night, when she said she was going to dinner with clients, I followed her. My heart was pounding as I parked a few blocks away and watched her step out of the house, dressed in an outfit I hadn't seen before. A new dress, new heels. She looked stunning, painfully so, like the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But she wasn't dressing up for me. I waited a few minutes before following her car, keeping my distance. And when she pulled into a hotel parking lot instead of a restaurant, my stomach dropped. I knew. I had known for a long time. But seeing it, watching her walk into that building without hesitation, was something else entirely. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the entrance. I imagined going in after her, catching her in the act, making a scene. But I didn't. Because I realized something in that moment. She had already left me. I just hadn't accepted it yet. Letting go without a fight. That night, when she came home, she acted like nothing had happened. She slipped into bed beside me, her skin still warm from whatever had happened in that hotel room. She sighed contentedly, like she had just had the best night of her life. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. I turned away from her, staring at the wall, and knew that this was the beginning of the end. But I wasn't going to let her be the one to decide how it ended. She had made her choices. Now it was my turn. That night, as I lay awake next to Marjorie, listening to her steady breathing, something inside me shifted. I had spent weeks, maybe months, drowning in confusion, heartbreak, and denial. But now, there was only clarity. She had already let go of us. Now, it was my turn. But I wasn't going to let her control how this ended. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of painting herself as the victim or rewriting our marriage as something that had just faded. She had made her choices. Now, I was going to make mine, preparing for the fallout. The next morning, I woke up before her. She was still curled up under the covers, looking peaceful, as if the lies she told me didn't weigh her down at all. I stared at her for a long moment, waiting for even the smallest flicker of guilt on her face. There was none. She didn't love me anymore. Maybe she never had. That realization should have destroyed me, but strangely it didn't. Instead, I felt lighter. I spent the day going through every detail of our life together, every shared account, every bill, every piece of property we owned. I wasn't going to be reckless. I wasn't going to give her a chance to twist this into a situation where I was the bad guy. I was going to take my time and do it right. She thought she was ahead of me. She thought I was still the clueless husband, too wrapped up in my own world to notice the cracks in our marriage. Let her think that, because when the moment came, it would be her turn to feel the ground disappear from under her feet. The lies get messy. The following week, I barely spoke to her. I didn't pull away in a way that would make her suspicious. I still smiled when she smiled, still asked her how her day was, still played my role. But something had changed. And maybe she felt it, because one evening, while we were having dinner, she looked at me for a long time before saying, "You've been quiet lately." I took a sip of my drink, forcing myself to look puzzled. "Have I?" She tilted her head. "Yeah. It's just, you don't seem like yourself." I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching her. Then I smiled. "I think I'm just seeing things more clearly now." She blinked, her lips parting slightly, but before she could ask what I meant, I changed the subject, because I wanted her to wonder. I wanted her to feel what I had felt for months, like something was shifting, like she was losing control. And I could tell by the way she looked at me that night. She did. She just didn't know why yet. The moment she realized. A few nights later, everything changed. It was a Friday, one of her business dinner nights. She had spent more time getting ready than usual, trying on 2 different outfits before settling on a black dress I'd never seen before. "Big client?" I asked casually, sitting on the bed as she fastened an earring. She hesitated, just for a second, but I caught it. "Yeah," she said lightly. "Just need to make a good impression." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. And then, right before she left, I said, "Have fun at the hotel?" Her whole body went rigid. Slowly, she turned to look at me, her eyes wide, her lips slightly parted. "What?" I kept my expression neutral. "I just meant, whatever restaurant you're actually going to, whatever excuse you've got lined up, whatever story you're planning to tell me when you get home, I hope you enjoy it." The color drained from her face. "Otis, what are you talking about?" I stood up, walked over to her, and gently took her hand in mine. "Closeness doesn't matter, right?" I murmured, repeating her words back to her. "Love changes." Her fingers trembled in my grasp. "I just want you to know," I continued, "that I see it now. I see everything." She pulled her hand away, stepping back. "I don't know what you think you." "Marjorie," I cut her off, my voice calm. "You don't have to lie to me anymore." For the first time since this all started, she looked scared. And it was in that moment I realized. She had been so sure I would never figure it out. She had underestimated me. But now, she knew the truth. I wasn't the clueless husband anymore. I was the man who was about to walk away. And this time, it would be her left standing in the wreckage. Marjorie stood there, frozen. The confidence she had carried for months, the arrogance of someone who believed they would never get caught, had drained from her face. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. I expected her to deny it, to scramble for an excuse, to spin another web of lies in the hopes of keeping me wrapped up in her fantasy. But she didn't. Instead, she let out a nervous laugh, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Otis," she said, forcing a smile. "You're being dramatic." I just stared at her. I wanted to see how far she would take it. "Dramatic?" I repeated slowly. "That's what you think this is?" She sighed, shaking her head. "I think you've been acting weird for weeks, and now you're imagining things. You've always been a little sensitive." There it was. The manipulation. The casual gaslighting. She wasn't even trying to deny it outright, just planting enough doubt to make me second-guess myself. Too bad for her. I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. All right, I said, nodding. If that's what you want to go with. She studied me carefully. She knew something was different. That was the thing about liars. They could always tell when the person they were lying to had stopped believing them. Still, she straightened her shoulders, grabbed her purse, and forced a casual tone. We'll talk when I get home, okay? I let her leave. I let her walk out that door thinking she still had control. But what she didn't know was that the moment she stepped out of our house, I had already moved on. The proof that broke her illusion. I didn't just have suspicions anymore. I had facts, receipts, bank statements, hotel reservations. And then there was the final piece, the one I had been waiting for. A friend of mine, a guy who worked in IT security, had helped me recover deleted messages from Marjorie's phone. She had been careful, deleting everything immediately after sending, but technology had a way of keeping things alive. And what I found, it wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship. Months of messages, sweet nothings, plans for the future, a whole world she had built with someone else while I was left in the dark. And the worst part? She had been talking about me. I just wish he would let go already. He's so needy. I can't stand it anymore. He doesn't get that I've already moved on. He's just there. I had read a lot of painful things in my life, but nothing came close to those words. She didn't just betray me. She despised me. And I had no idea. The moment she realized she lost. When she came home that night, she expected everything to be the same. She walked through the door, dropped her purse on the table, and stretched like she had just returned from a relaxing evening. Hey, she said casually, you're still up? I was sitting at the kitchen table, a folder in front of me, waiting. She took one look at my face and her smile faltered. Otis? I slid the folder across the table. Open it. She frowned, glancing at it, then back at me. What is this? Just open it. She hesitated. Then, with slow, careful movements, she flipped it open. And everything, every message, every receipt, every secret she thought she had buried, was laid out in front of her. I watched her face shift in real time. Shock, panic, then desperation. Otis, she let out a shaky breath. This isn't. Don't. I cut her off. My voice was eerily calm. Don't insult me by lying again. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she was speechless. Good. Because I wasn't done. I know everything, I said, standing up. I know who he is. I know how long this has been going on. I know what you've been saying about me. She flinched. And then, the tears started. I had expected them. Not because she was sorry, but because she knew she had lost. She knew she wasn't in control anymore. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Otis, please, she whispered. We can talk about this. I was just confused. It wasn't serious. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You never meant to hurt me? I repeated. That's interesting, considering you've been planning a whole new life behind my back. Her lip trembled. I was going to tell you. No, you weren't. I shook my head. You were going to keep me as an option, a backup, until you were ready to leave. I watched the realization sink in. She had no more cards left to play. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She got angry. You don't get to do this to me. Her voice sharpened, her eyes flashing. You don't get to ambush me like this and act like you're the victim. I exhaled slowly. I'm not acting, Marjorie. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing heavily, her hands clenched at her sides. And then, her voice dropped. What do you want? She asked, defeated. I looked at her, this woman I had once loved more than anything, and felt nothing. I want you gone. Silence. She blinked, her jaw tightening. Just like that? Just like that. She shook her head, letting out a humorless laugh. And you think it's that easy? You think you can just walk away? I held her gaze. I already have. The final goodbye. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because I had to, but because I chose to. And when I woke up, she was gone. Her closet was half empty. Her things were missing. She didn't even leave a note. And you know what? I didn't need one. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. When I woke up the next morning, the house was quiet, eerily so. Marjorie was gone. Her side of the closet was half empty, a few stray hangers swinging lightly from where she had hastily pulled her clothes off the rack. The drawers where she kept her jewelry, her skincare, her little personal items, wiped clean. Even her favorite coffee mug was missing from the kitchen counter. She hadn't just left. She had made sure I felt it. And yet, as I stood in the middle of our now half-empty bedroom, staring at the space where her presence used to be, I didn't feel the crushing sadness I expected. I felt relief. When the lies don't stop, I knew she hadn't left out of guilt. She hadn't left because she was sorry. She left because she was angry. Angry that I hadn't begged her to stay. Angry that I had taken control of the narrative. Angry that, in the end, she wasn't the one calling the shots. And she wasn't done yet. It didn't even take 24 hours before I got the first message. Marjorie, we need to talk. You're overreacting. I ignored it. Then, an hour later, Marjorie, I don't deserve this, Otis. You blindsided me. You're throwing away years over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that almost made me laugh. By the third message, she had switched tactics. Marjorie, you were never perfect either. Don't act like I was the only one who made mistakes. And there it was. The classic turn it back on him move. The only problem? I wasn't playing that game anymore. The people who pick sides. The moment she left, the fallout began. Mutual friends started reaching out, some cautiously, some outright nosy. They had heard something happened and wanted to check in. Translation? She was already telling her version of the story. It didn't take long before I got a call from a friend of hers, someone I had never been close to but had always tolerated. Otis, she started, her voice dripping with forced sympathy. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry you and Marjorie are going through this. She's really struggling. I kept my voice even. Struggling? Yes, she's devastated. She told me you just kicked her out without warning. She thought things were getting better, and then suddenly you were done. I almost dropped the phone. She thought things were getting better? Better for who? I took a slow breath, resisting the urge to tell this woman exactly what Marjorie had done. But I knew better. I wasn't going to defend myself to her friends. So I just said, if that's what she told you, then I guess that's the story she's going with. There was a pause. You're not even going to fight for her? That was the moment I realized just how deeply Marjorie had manipulated the people around her. She had spent months treating me like an afterthought. She had lied to my face. She had built a future with someone else behind my back. And yet, I was still expected to be the one chasing her, fighting for her, apologizing to her. I let out a quiet chuckle. No, I said simply. I'm not. The conversation ended shortly after that. And little by little, the people who had always been her people disappeared from my life. I didn't stop them, because I had no intention of holding on to anyone who thought I owed her my loyalty after everything she had done. When reality hits her, for a while, it was silent. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from her at 2 a.m. Marjorie, I don't know why I did it. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. And for the first time since this all started, I felt something other than anger. Pity. Because now that she had lost me, now that she had no one to manipulate, no one to fall back on, now she was questioning her choices. I didn't reply. And for the first time in a long time, I went to sleep peacefully. For the first time in months, I felt free. Not just from the marriage, but from the illusion I had been trapped in. The version of my wife that I had loved, the one I had trusted, supported, and built a life with, hadn't existed for a long time. And maybe, just maybe, she had never existed at all. But Marjorie? She was just beginning to understand what she had done. The messages that went nowhere. After her 2 a.m. confession, I expected silence. I expected her to disappear into whatever life she had been so desperate to create with her affair partner. But I was wrong. Because the next morning, there was another message. Marjorie, I don't know why you won't talk to me. After everything we've been through, I deserve at least a conversation. I deserve. Not I'm sorry. Not I messed up. Not I hurt you. and I regret it. No. She still believed that she was the one owed something. I didn't respond. Then came another. Marjorie, we need to talk about the house. I don't think it's fair that you keep it. Fair. Fair. Was it fair when she was sneaking around behind my back? Was it fair when she was planning a future with another man while I was still trying to fix our marriage? I didn't respond to that one either. Then, a few days later, Marjorie, I made a mistake. Please, Otis, just talk to me. And there it was, the slow unraveling. When the world stops protecting her, I heard through mutual connections that things weren't going as smoothly for her as she had probably imagined. Her affair partner? He wasn't hers anymore. Apparently, he had other women. Women who knew about Marjorie, who had warned her, and who had now made it clear that she was just one in a long line of women who had fallen for his routine. She had left our marriage for this man, and now she was just another discarded option. The job she had been prioritizing over me? She got let go. Not for anything dramatic, but because she had been slacking, coming in late, distracted, not delivering the results she once had. Turns out, her secret second life had taken a lot more energy than she realized. And the friends who had once rallied around her, even they started backing away. Because without the carefully curated image of a woman who had been neglected by her husband, without the poor Marjorie act, there was nothing left but the truth. And the truth was, she had destroyed her own life. The final attempt to rewrite history. A few weeks later, I got the message that almost made me laugh. Marjorie, I was thinking, maybe we could go to therapy? Try to fix this? I don't want to throw everything away. Therapy. Now? After months of lying, of sneaking, of gaslighting? After I had spent so much time blaming myself, thinking I wasn't enough, wondering what I had done wrong, I sat with my phone in my hands, rereading her message over and over again. And then, for the first time since she walked out of my life, I responded. Me? There's nothing left to fix, Marjorie. You made sure of that. She replied within seconds. Marjorie, so that's it? You're just giving up? I let out a slow breath, shaking my head at the irony. Me? No, Marjorie. I gave up a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until now. This time, there was no response. And I knew, finally, truly, completely, that I was done. The closure she'll never get. People always talk about closure like it's something you need from the other person. But the truth is, you don't. Sometimes, the best closure is knowing that you walked away before they could hurt you again. Marjorie had spent so much time believing I would never leave. She was so sure I would always be there, waiting, hoping, fighting. But she was wrong. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping. I wasn't fighting. I was moving on. And that was something she would never be able to undo. For the first time in years, I woke up feeling free. Not just free from the lies, the betrayal, or the weight of a broken marriage, but free from her. Marjorie had spent so long believing she was the center of my world, that no matter what she did, I would always be there, waiting. She thought I would chase her, beg for her back, give her another chance. But she was wrong, because I wasn't that man anymore, and I never would be again. Watching her fade into the past, the messages stopped coming. At first, I thought she would try one last time to pull me back in, to spin some new version of events where she was the victim and I was the heartless husband who walked away. But no, she just disappeared. Maybe she realized that nothing she said would change what she had done. Maybe she finally understood that I wasn't her backup plan anymore. Or maybe she just couldn't handle the fact that she had lost everything she thought she would always have. Either way, I didn't care. She was a part of my past now, and that's exactly where she would stay, building a life that was truly mine. The house felt different without her, lighter. At first, I thought I would hate being alone, that I would feel the weight of her absence in every room, every quiet morning, every empty spot in the bed. But the truth? It felt amazing. I started living again. I picked up old hobbies I had neglected, ones that had once made me happy before I spent all my energy trying to fix something that was never meant to be fixed. I reconnected with friends, real friends, people who hadn't just been in my life because of her. And for the first time in years, I started looking forward instead of dwelling on the past. The unexpected moment that proved I was free. One day, months later, I ran into someone. A woman. Not in some dramatic, movie-like way. No accidental coffee spills, no stolen glances across a crowded room. Just a simple conversation in a bookstore, where we both reached for the same book at the same time and laughed about it. Her name was Ingrid, and she was nothing like Marjorie. She didn't play games. She didn't make me feel like I had to earn her attention, or like I was some second choice she was settling for. She was real, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The future that belonged to me. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Ingrid will just be a passing chapter in my story, or maybe she'll be something more. But for once, I'm not overthinking it. Because I finally understand that love, real love, doesn't make you feel like you're constantly fighting for a place in someone's life. It doesn't make you feel small, or replaceable, or like you're just waiting to be left behind. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. I may have lost Marjorie, but I found myself. And that's the best ending I could have ever asked for.